All right. So today we start chapter 6. Just remember, on the exam we did not have chapter 5. So last exam, chapter 5 is included. Okay. So today we are looking at East Asian food and culture, and I will be talking also about acculturation and health with a case of cardiovascular disease. All right. For the East Asian countries, we will only look at China, Japan, and Korea. All right. I'm not going to mention Mongolia and the other countries that we have around. Okay, so as you know, Asia is pretty big, covering around 1/3 of the world's land. So, and 2/3 of the world population. So Asia really has like a big culture. And when we studied the religions a couple of weeks ago, we also saw the religions that really came from Asia. Obviously Hinduism and Buddhism, but we also had other ones that before started as a philosophy, like a way of living. For example, Confucianism, which is a philosophy, but today is kind of like a religion. And today, even when we talk about Korean culture, because of definition of acculturation, just like, you know, two cultures coming together, and because of it, there is a change that is taking place. It's difficult to really say, oh, this is Korean typical culture, because in Korea, you know, we had at one point of time a lot of Chinese, and at one point of time the Japanese in Korea for a long time. So the culture keeps changing a little bit, right? So the population here I put in red, over 1.3 billion people worldwide. So this is really a very huge, very huge number. Of course, even though we talk about China as a country, we also have different ethnicity. And I was talking to some Chinese. It's also possible that some parts people cannot actually understand each other. So it's pretty huge. We have a diverse language with many dialects. Okay, so this is the part that I wanted to look at when we talk about Confucianism. We also have one institute here at Keimyung University. So he pretty much changed the whole culture in Asia, mainly in Korea, Japan, and China. How people behave, and even how the relationship in the family, father and the children, the wife and the husband, how somebody has to be submissive, honoring people. This is why you will see, for example, that in Korea, when we say hello, specifically, if you say hello to your teacher, I mean, not for me, no problem, but in Korean culture, you know, people will bow, right? So bowing is not really something that is, oh, I'm small or something like that. It's a way of showing respect. Okay? Developed with the Confucius theory. So he was a sage who gave order to Chinese society by defining how people should live and work together. Even in Korea, we talk a lot about it, you know, working hard. You know, the value of work was actually also put in the heart of people with the Confucius theory. Here, what did I put here? Children obey their parents, parents take care of their children. And we have that very much present in Korea too, right? Not only in China. Even when we say, okay, when your parents are getting older, what do? We take care of their parents. All right? It's something that is there. Children have to be submissive to the parents. And I often say that Korean children or Korean students are actually very good, well-mannered, and things like that. So these are actually, we'll say, great values to have. Tolerance in the elders, brother, humility in the younger. It's very, very close to the African culture to some extent. I think you have that here. You will call, if you're a man, you call another, somebody who's older than you call him a young, older brother, right? And between the girls is also the same thing, the sign of respect for people who are born before us. So, in terms of the religions that you have there in China, okay, one popular one is the Taoism. It's a little bit very close to what we studied before, but we didn't look at this religion really like in detail. But what can you remember, basically, is what I mentioned before, is that everything in nature contains both yin and yang, which is not different for what we have in Korea, right? In Korea is what? And yang. So we have this harmony, that balance. It's the same, we talk about the hot and the cold. So that balance is actually part of not only the Chinese culture, but also the Korean culture. So it's not really different. Only small differences that we may see, because, okay, we say language. Language is part of the culture here. All right? So I will not spend a lot of time on some of those things. You will have them on your PPT. All right, Buddhism, we looked at Buddhism a couple of weeks ago, all right? So, like I told you, sometimes, religion is kind of a different form of a culture as well. And for example, when we talk about the Jewish people, we say, for example, Judaism, this is a religion that is also a culture, that also defines a nation. Because when you are, for example, a Jew, you also belong to that religion. So Buddhism, very present in China, also very present in Korea as well. We mentioned that already a couple of weeks ago. So I will not be coming back to it. But because we look at China as a country, so we also look at what is present there and what is important there. And Buddhism has a big place in the heart of people. Of course, it's blended with traditional Chinese beliefs as well, and we'll see something similar when we will look at Japan. All right, so these are the parts I often like to talk about when we talk about food and culture. We also have to look at the health aspect of it, and then we'll check something about that culturation. Of course, the traditional health belief, we studied that I think in chapter 3, when we look at traditional health and the biomedicine. So, again, the same words keep coming, adapted to include concept of yin and yang, the balance of opposite. Illness develops when imbalance occurs. All right? So, when we don't have that balance, this is when we become ill. So that adjustment has to be there. For example, now it's starting to get cold, right? So what do we learn about the food habits? Now food choice must change. Since it's getting cold outside, now we have to eat different type of food. And the food has to be a little bit hot. If you love noodles, then it's going to be like hot noodles. And summertime, we're going to eat exactly. Okay, so we mentioned that part, excess of yang. So when you go, we talk about Chinese traditional medicine, because we examine the whole body and the history. So we will say, okay, if somebody has some acne, rash, hemorrhoid, ear infection, say, maybe we having some excess of yang. Okay. You go to the Chinese traditional doctor. The excess of yin, what do we have? Anemia, colds, nausea, weight loss. So these are general understanding, general definition. Which question did we ask on the exam? We wanted to know. Which medicine can verify. Which medicine can verify the claim? For example, here, if we talk about anemia, most of you took already nutrition classes. If we talk about anemia, here in Chinese traditional medicine, what we learn is it comes from excess of yin, right? How can we verify that claim? How can we verify this one? Exactly. Biomedicine can verify the claim. So what do we learn in biomedicine? For example, if you go to the hospital, the doctor say, oh, okay, you are anemic. So anemia here in biomedicine, why do we have this condition? Very good. So here, we can say here we have, the person is iron deficient. Okay? So we will do some tests. And remember, the ABCD test that we do biochemical testing, right? So, and we can see that, oh, this person is iron deficient. Okay? So, so when we are iron deficient, what will be the alternative? What can be the options for some of these people in terms of food? Exactly. So here we have two options. Okay, I mean depending on the diet that the person is actually using. Remember here, you know, we go naturally. So we may propose enriched food or what? Or fortified food. Yes. And in the life of immigrants, because we will be talking about this, the health of foreigners, the health of immigrants in the new country, as we talk about acculturation, we have to look at these elements, right? When we check the health status of these people. I hope you still remember this definition: enriched food and fortified food. All right. So, so we look at that. So biomedicine will be able to verify the claim that we got from the traditional medicine, or from the Chinese traditional medicine in this case. Same with the Korean traditional medicine. Okay? Alright, so traditional food, this, you know, rice is the staple food basically all over Asia, right? Almost all over Asia. That has been like in Korea, Japan, China. So, neighboring country, rice is really like the staple food. We eat rice every day. But if you take the nutrition class that some of you took with me, how we plan a healthy diet, one key element that we mentioned is variety, meaning that if we eat rice today, we want to make sure that the next day we have a different food group. So we can replace rice with what? Any example? With bread, for example, right? So, and the following day, you get something else. Because you want to make sure that you have different nutrients. Okay? If you eat the same food every day, there is a chance that you will be nutrient deficient, right? Because eating the same food will give you the same nutrients, nothing new. Nothing new. All right? So we will look at it, and we will also look at the consequences with some diseases as well. All right? So very popular, as you know, tea we have three types, the green one, the black one, and what we call the black dragon or oolong tea. Okay. So many people say that the tea actually originated from China. We have these three types of tea, green tea, black tea, oolong tea. These are things that pretty much everybody knows. The etiquette, this is just in terms of culture. You can confirm it because I think that you know the Asian culture way better than me, right? When we eat rice in Korea compared to China, I think what he said is the Chinese, they carry the bowl and eat the rice this way, isn't it? In Korea, do you carry the rice? So, oftentimes, foreigners, when you look at Asian, you see, for example, one Korean and one Chinese. It's not, when I first came, it was not easy to know which one is Korean or Chinese. But sometimes we can know by the way people behave, right? But the way they do things, or we may say maybe the way they eat the rice. That if somebody carry the rice like this and eat with the chopsticks, maybe he's Chinese. Okay? But element of acculturation, changing of culture, if you see a Korean doing that, there is a chance that he studied in China and stayed in China for a long time. So as we stay in the country, we adopt new behavior. Okay. Also, I also found out that the chopsticks, Korean chopsticks, Japanese chopsticks, and the Chinese ones are different, right? But these are like small different, but when you come from the Western world, usually we just see them as chopsticks, but they are small differences, but not really major one. Therapeutic use of food, we mentioned it, the hot and the cold, depending on the season or depending of your health state. Alright, we have here hot food, eating well in winter. Now winter is coming, slowly. Pregnancy, cold, and the cold food we have consumed in summer, constipation, diarrhea. So you always have this type of different food recommended depending on the season. Okay, but don't worry too much about this part. You don't have to really spend much time. Just general information. All right. So this is the part that I want to look at because, like I told you, as the country changes, you know, we have more and more immigrants coming in the country, and I'm actually writing a new paper right now. So we investigated the number of English teachers. You have a lot of English teachers in Korea, right? So so we check the relationship between acculturation and the risk of cardiovascular disease. Okay, the risk of cardiovascular disease. But just maybe to help you remember again, everybody, you remember this picture? I showed this picture before, maybe? No? So here, when we talk about cardiovascular disease, it's actually a group of disease that is involved with the heart, all right, and the vessels here. And the center place is the same picture. This is the picture you had on the exam, right? The famous picture. So the center one will be atherosclerosis here, when you have abnormal blood lipid. If you see, there is a direct relationship between atherosclerosis and stroke or heart attack. Also related with high blood pressure. Are you guys able to see? Okay, so what is taking place here is when we have these plaques that are formed and the blood is not able to move freely, and this is where we may have problem like a heart attack or things like that. So now what we have is, in the case of cardiovascular disease, there are risk factors that we can change, and there are also risk factors that, oh, okay, it's not really your fault, there is nothing you can do about it. And I want you to write them down, okay? Cardiovascular disease. Cardiovascular disease risk factors, okay? So, so you have known. So these are non-modifiable risk factors. Non-modifiable risk factors. So basically, you cannot change it. There is nothing you can do about it. All right? Nothing you can do about it. So there is something that you cannot change. Basically, is what? Your age. The first one is your age. So the risk, cardiovascular risk factors, will increase with age as you get much older, right? So the risk of cardiovascular disease also started to increase. All right? So when we put it here, remember we study acculturation and health, so we examine the health of immigrants in the country, right? And now we're looking at specifically cardiovascular disease and try to understand what are the factors we can change and what are the factors that we cannot change. So let's look at those we cannot change. So basically here there's nothing you can do about it. Number 2 is gender, right? Gender. So before the age of 60, usually men are more likely to have cardiovascular disease compared to women. All right? But interesting enough, statistically, these numbers change oftentimes, and a lot of papers that we read is not always very stable. But it seems like, but women die of cardiovascular disease more than men. Okay, but always have this picture in mind when we talk, for example, about the risk factors, about obesity and the association with other diseases. All right. So another factor that you cannot change is what? Is genetic factors. Genetic factors. So I wrote a paper about some foreigners in Korea and the risk of high blood pressure. And so on that paper, we just realized that if your parents had high blood pressure, there is a chance that you will have high blood pressure, right? There are also the factors that may contribute to high blood pressure, but the odds of having hypertension was like around four times higher than a person whose mother or father didn't have high blood pressure. Okay? So there is a risk. There is basically what we call a genetic factor. There is nothing you can basically change about it. You know, you don't choose your mom, you don't choose your father, right? It's life. So you cannot change that. So the number 4 is what? Is race or ethnicity. Race or ethnicity. For example, when we talk about high blood pressure or some other you will see, for example, in the US, black woman, African American woman, seems to have a higher risk of having high blood pressure compared to Caucasians when we talk about race. So when we do research, sometimes it's very challenging. If I just take everybody, I say, okay, male, female, all right, because we talk about the gender. But at one point, we also have to separate by race, by saying, okay, here we have Asian woman, all right, here we have a Caucasian man, so we have here Caucasian woman, and then we can compare, because race is also a factor. You don't choose your race, right? You don't choose your race, you just born the same way you don't choose your parents, all right? Nothing you can do about it. But when we do the research, yeah, we have to look at it. This is why, for example, that has been in Canada or in the US, we have many Koreans who immigrated there, many Japanese, many Chinese. But after a time, we have to look. We have to look at their acculturation and their health. Okay, okay? Now, the good news, here we have now modifiable risk factors. Modifiable risk factors, it means now it's not biological. Now it's really you. It means now it's up to you. This is now the behavior, right? What you are doing, how you living every day. How you live every day, it's something that you can change if you want to, right? It's something that you can change. If you like smoking, you can say, you know, no more. If you like chimek, you can say no more. So it's a choice. It's a choice. So, the first, number one is, we talk about high blood pressure. Number one, high blood pressure. And of course, the problem of high blood pressure has like different factors. The main one be the association with obesity, as you know. And we can say that obesity can be, biological, genetical, but also maybe food choices, the way, our behavior, things like that. So you cannot only choose one element. Everything has to be together, all right? Number two, diabetes. But when I talk about diabetes here, I really focus mostly on the type 2. And another risk factors that you have here, we have diabetes here, also associated with obesity when we talk about insulin resistance. All of you took the nutrition classes with me. This is something that we, really spend a whole chapter studying diabetes. So you understand how it works. Number three, very important, smoking. Smoking, right? So this is also a choice. Like I told you, the paper that we are working on right now, we look at these modifiable factors, and we just found out, we interviewed 385 foreigners who are English teachers, and more than around 11% of these teachers have, developing problems such as hypertension, diabetes, and some of these problems that are cardiovascular disease risk factors. Okay, so when we look at it, even though it looks like a small sample, we have to find ways to improve the health of these people. Number four is what? Physical inactivity. Physical inactivity. Okay? So you're not doing any sports, you just watch Korean drama, it might not be the best thing to do, right? So, but all these things are related. So which means we have to exercise more often. Number five, are mentioning overweight or obesity. As you know, we're talking about a BMI that is between, if we combine overweight and obesity, so we're talking about BMI over 25, in the case of obesity, BMI over 30, body mass index. Okay? Alright, so, I'm going to erase the top part, alright? So, number 6 here, we have high blood cholesterol. Okay? Number 7, excessive alcohol. And number 8, that one we did not measure it, it's a little bit complicated to measure it, is excessive stress. Alright? For example, what we found out, a lot of immigrants, for example from Ethiopia, when they moved to Israel, after a time you just realized that the blood pressure went actually up, maybe experiencing a lot of stress. So now, these are the risk factors. These are the risk factors that we can change. These are the risk factors that we can change, and now we ask the question: how do we then measure acculturation? All right. So. Can I erase all of these? So what do we do? So we have this group of people, we have all these basic information. So we have new people coming into the country, so they will go through, they will experience acculturation, meaning, change, adaptation, change of culture. So the acculturation variable that we measure, there are different ones. Usually the first one that we measure is the language, right? For example, if it's in the state, we may ask them, the language that they speak at home, right? And we also can ask about their ability to speak the language very well. We may ask, in the case of Korea, we may ask them how well they speak Korean. Is language a very important factor, right, in living in a country? Korea is a little bit different because if you do speak English in Korea, you can actually live kind of stress-free, right? When I'm sick, I just call and they always have a doctor who can speak English. But if you live in Canada, where the two official languages are either French or English, and your only language that you know is Korean, it might be very challenging for you to get any service. So because if you cannot speak French and you cannot speak English, it will be difficult for you to get anything in the country, right? It will be difficult. Korea is kind of exceptional in the way, because even when you drive on the street, you have the Korean language and you have also English there. So the research that I did on high blood pressure and foreigners in Korea, language was not a problem. There is no relationship between high blood pressure and language. Even though it's a big issue, for example, for the Ethiopians when they went to Israel, or some other Mexican, or a lot of Mexicans from Mexico coming to the US because they speak Spanish. They come to the US, they're not able to speak English properly, their language become a problem. It become this is a measure of acculturation. Then it can actually contribute to risk of cardiovascular disease, including high blood pressure. All right? So we measure language. When you go home, we ask you, which language do you speak when you are home? Oh, we speak Spanish, right? Or we speak Korean, but you don't speak the language of the native, of the host country. Then it's a challenge, right? It's a challenge. So another one that we measure is age. Age. Now we may also have two. We may have age at immigration. Age at immigration, basically asking you how old were you when you came to Korea? Okay? My son, for example, he came to Korea when he was 2 years old, so he speaks good Korean. But me, I can't. I came a little bit old, not too old, but kind of old. All right? So age is a very important element when we measure acculturation, because the youngest you come to the country, the better it is, right? The better it is. All right? So we ask for age at immigration, and we can also ask age at interview. For example, I'm talking to you right now. So what do we realize? For example, in the paper that I wrote, and it's in line with other research. Most people who say to have problem with high blood pressure, they were over 40 years old. The other foreigners who were like much younger, a lot of them didn't have that issue. And remember, when we mentioned age as a non-modifiable factor, now you understand why. Because there's nothing you can do. You get older and your health, gets a little bit weaker. And now, the present study that we are doing, the one that I measure is the length of stay. The length of stay. So we ask people, how long have you been in Korea? Okay? No problem, you can take a picture. So we ask, how long have you been in Korea? And then, we just realized that the longer people stay in the host country, the likely they will have this risk of developing cardiovascular disease. All right? So, and then we can look at different factors why they will develop these type of problems. Because most of the time when people go to a new country, most of the time they're healthy. But the longer you stay, also you go through acculturation, it's kind of normal. It's kind of normal that, over time, your health will also go down. But there are also other factors as well. So we ask people, we verify the relationship between the duration of stay in a country and the risk of cardiovascular disease. And for example, in the recent research that I did, we just realized that people who have been in Korea for more than 5 years are likely to report having cardiovascular disease compared to those who've been in Korea for less than 5 years. Okay? So we also look at that. when we look at the health of the Asian people in the US or in Canada, some of them have been there for 20 years and more. So we compare all of that. So if some of you, those of you would be interested in doing like continuous studies and master or PhD, you can look at some of these elements. And the government of Korea has, a big bank of information where you can just analyze some information and check the health of foreigners in Korea. All right, so I'm going to stop here for today. So next week we will look at Japan and Korea. We're going to go pretty fast there. Okay? All right, have a nice day, and remember that smoking and drinking is a risk for cardiovascular disease. I'm just telling you. Yeah. Okay, have a nice day.
你爱似面款，让我从敌人手中，你拯救了我，惧怕中的自由，我不再被恐惧奴役，因你是我。 我不再被恐惧奴役，因你是我天赋。从我幕府中，你拣选了我。 你爱呼唤我名，我重生的酒进入你家中，宝血流入我生命，我不再被恐惧奴役，因你是我。 我不再被恐惧奴役，因你是我天赋。我不再被恐惧奴役，因你是我天赋。我不再被恐惧。 你是我天赋。
我시내에서 약속 있으면 일단 연락해. 집 앞에 두고 1층에.
我的张示范
올라갈 필요 없어.
的